Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, we are going to be previewing the upcoming season for the Los Angeles Clippers. However, before I get too far into it, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the Clips. However, before I think that we can adequately preview the upcoming season for the team, I want to reflect upon and discuss the recent transactions that this team made in the concluded NBA offseason. They started off by trading Landry Shamet and Rodney McGruder for Luke Kennard and 4 second-round picks, along with Justin Patton, who I believe was cut on draft night. Now, this was obviously a terrific trade for this team because I think that Luke Kennard is a better player than Landry Shamet. They have to pay him a year earlier, but this is a team that's looking to win a championship this year, and this is a clear upgrade as a backup wing option. And they also got the 4 future second-round picks, a lot of which are the Pistons' own picks and could have a lot of value moving forward, could basically be top 5 second-round picks, which is certainly great value, and they essentially gave up Rodney McGruder to get that. So I think that this was a terrific trade for them. They also traded a future second, I believe their 2023 second-round pick, in exchange for the 33rd pick from the New York Knicks. Another really smart move by the Clippers brass, in which they were able to acquire a very early second-round pick that they are going to use this year. Obviously, they drafted Daniel Oturu, who was a player I liked quite a bit, and I think was certainly a reasonable pick here at 33. And he's going to be on the active roster for this team because of how cheap his contract is. They're able to use that roster spot and only pay him the rookie minimum, which is terrific for helping to keep them under the cap, not the salary cap, what is it? The hard cap, as obviously they made they used the full mid-level exception in signing Serge Ibaka. So, yeah, they are limited to certain spending powers, and it was a very nice move to get an early second-round pick in Daniel Oturu that is certainly going to be of some usage to them potentially moving forward. They also traded the 57th pick for the 55th pick, basically straight up, where they acquired Jay Scrubb. Scrubb was a player that a few teams had pegged as a first-round pick. I wasn't too high on him, but I also hadn't seen too much of him, so I don't feel too qualified to talk about him too much, but certainly someone that a lot of people think has some potential to blossom into rotation player in the league. In free agency, they re-signed Patrick Patterson to a 1-year, $3 million deal. Not much to say here. He's mostly an end-of-the-bench type player who won't really play in the playoffs, might get some regular season rotation minutes. They also re-signed Marcus Morris to a 4-year, $64 million contract. This is a contract that they absolutely had to dole out because it was imperative for them to retain Morris, considering that it was going to be nearly impossible for them to replace his production. And I actually don't think it's too terrible of a number. Yeah, it's definitely an overpay, but considering that they couldn't afford to lose this guy, it makes sense to me, at the very least. They signed Serge Ibaka to a 2-year, $19 million contract. In my opinion, Ibaka is a clear upgrade over Montrezl Harrell as your backup center, so this was another nice move that I liked quite a bit. They kept Reggie Jackson around on a 1-year minimum and signed Nick Batum on a 1-year minimum. I think both of those two players are better than minimum contract status, so once again, 2 moves that I liked quite a bit. Overall, I liked this offseason for the Clippers, and I think that they significantly made their team better, both by signing Serge Ibaka and by trading for Luke Kennard. That will be reflected in my predictions later on in the video. Now that we've reviewed the offseason, I think that we're ready to preview the upcoming season. When I do this, I run through an exercise where I give my expectations and thoughts on every single player on the active roster, and then at the end, I accumulate all of those thoughts and make my prediction for what I think the team is capable of performing at for the upcoming year. When we do this, we start at the point guard position, so the first guy I'm going to talk about is Patrick Beverley. Beverley has earned a reputation as one of the better point of attack defenders in the entire NBA, and he has, for the most part, earned that reputation. He does a terrific job of pressuring the ball and creating transition opportunities with his knack for steals, as well as blocking jump shots at a high level for a guard. However, he is pretty foul prone, and that takes away from how effective he truthfully is on the defensive end of the floor. On offense, he's a good three-point shooter, is above average, and that is terrific on a team that has players that are able to generate open looks for their teammates, such as Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. However, he's not much of a shot creator, and considering that Leonard, despite having taken a step forward in the playmaking department, something we'll touch on a bit more later, is not necessarily someone that can be a primary playmaker for your team, and Patrick Beverley certainly is not that either. So that was an area that this team needed to upgrade, and many people are pointing out that they did not necessarily make that upgrade, although I do think Luke Kennard can fill in a bit of that role. Lou Williams is kind of the anti-Patrick Beverley, as he's an absolute liability on the defensive end of the floor, and that limits how effective he can be in the postseason. He really cannot be on the court at the conclusion of games during the postseason because teams will just run pick and roll coverages with their best player and the player that Lou Williams is guarding in an attempt to get Lou Williams switched onto their best player, where said player will take advantage of Lou Williams and score on him with ease, considering that Williams is one of the worst defensive players in the entirety of the NBA. However, Williams does have a lot of offensive value, and that makes him a pretty effective player in the regular season. He's terrific in the pick and roll, tends to make the right read coming out of those situations a lot of the time. Pretty good passer to big men rolling to the rim, as we saw with his chemistry with Montrezl Harrell last season. He also has an effective pull-up jump shot that he's able to knock down at a high level, and a pretty good floater as well. So with the combination of his three-point shooting, passing, and in between game, Lou Williams is certainly an effective offensive player. However, because of the defensive struggles, he's not necessarily someone that you can count on to give you 25 plus minutes during the playoffs. And that's why I think that Luke Kennard deal was such a nice move for the Clippers. I'm going to be talking about that quite a bit in this video because I really think he's going to make this team quite a bit better if he can stay healthy. Last guy at the point guard position here is Reggie Jackson. Jackson is probably somewhere in between Beverley and Williams on the defensive end of the floor. Well, he's not necessarily good on that end, and he's another player that can be taken advantage of in mismatches. If he's matched up against a player of equal or lesser skill value than him, he is certainly competent and can limit that player and what he's able to do on the offensive end of the floor. On offense, when his team has the ball, obviously, he is a good floor spacer who can knock down the three-point shot at a high level, shot at around 39% from three last year, 39.3 if I'm not mistaken. So that is once again super valuable on a team that has the terrific shot creators that we talked about before in their two big wings. Reggie Jackson is a very good backup point guard in this league, and considering that he's the third point guard on this Los Angeles Clippers team on a minimum deal, I think that this is a very nice bargain contract for them and someone that is, once again, going to have a chance to squeak his way into that playoff rotation and be an impactful guy for this team when the games really start counting. Now that we've finished up the point guard position, we can move on to the wing, where we'll start with, obviously, the MVP of this team, Kawhi Leonard. Leonard is genuinely a terrific defensive player, one of the best in the league, someone that everyone expects to be in the race for an all-defensive team year in and year out because of his disruptiveness. He uses his length and strength to generate steals for his team, and he is also just a great on-ball defender in general, where he's able to use those great athletic tools to limit what his matchup can do on the offensive end of the floor. He also is terrific off the ball, where he's a nice weak side rim protector who seems to always be in the right position in rotations and can jump passing lanes at a high level as well. On the offensive end, he is one of the best in-between game players in the entire league. He can knock down mid-range shots off the bounce at a very high level, is great at getting to his spots and knocking down shots from those spots. He also took a huge step forward in the playmaking department, as we saw him post a monumental career high in assist rate last season. If he can take another step forward there, I think that really cements his place as one of the two best players in the NBA, and I think he is anyways, so he doesn't even need to make that step forward, but if he can, watch out, because it makes him all that more lethal and really makes this Clippers team quite a bit better considering their lack of shot creation at the top of this roster. Paul George is the perfect complement to Kawhi Leonard because of his ability to space the floor and knock down three-pointers. Genuinely one of the best three-point shooters in the entire NBA. Can shoot it off catch and shoots, can shoot it off movement, can shoot it off the bounce. Is also a very high-level shot creator. He is knocked down in the mid-range and can get to the basket as well. He's a good transition player where he can finish at a high level and does a great job of getting to the corner where he's able to knock down wide open catch and shoot opportunities. On defense, he's not quite the on-ball menace that Kawhi Leonard is, but he's really good off the ball, and the combination of those two should make the Clippers a top 10 defense with those two alone. And when you add in Patrick Beverley and Ivica Zubac and the other plus defenders on this team, it just makes them all that much more lethal. Next guy here is Luke Kennard. Kennard is a player that I like quite a bit, in case you haven't picked that up already, because of his ability to be a knockdown three-point shooter as well as a solid shot creator off the dribble. He is someone that can play really well in the pick and roll, is a good passer, and can make the right read to find a big man rolling to the basket. He also has a solid pull-up game in which he's able to utilize in that pick and roll two-man game opportunities. On the defensive end, he is certainly not good, but he's also not a complete liability, and he's someone that I think that you can trust on the court out there in playoff games, which is definitely an improvement over Lou Williams. And I think that he is going to be a super high-level bench player for this team, and I think that he makes them quite a bit better, and I'm excited to see what he looks like coming off of those injuries. If he can't stay on the court, however, and that's certainly a possibility considering his injury history, that really takes away from his value and makes this trade look a little bit less in the Clippers' victory, a little bit less of a Clippers victory, but nonetheless, they got 4 second-round picks for Rodney McGruder. How can that ever be bad? Next guy here is Marcus Morris. Morris is a player that I just don't really get. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, his fit in the NBA as an isolation-heavy scorer who's not necessarily an efficient shooter. However, I do think, or an efficient isolation scorer, excuse me, because he actually is an efficient shooter. Shot at over 40% from 3 last year, which, as I've said before in this video, is super valuable to this Clippers team. When he's giving good effort defensively, he is someone who's capable of taking on some difficult matchups because of his strength and size. Marcus Morris, when he's locked in, has a chance to be a very good 3-and-D wing player. The question is if he's able to accept that role and if he's able to play at the high effort and motor level that's necessary for him to really reach that high-level 3-and-D role player that he can possibly be. Now that we've covered all of the wings... Oh, wait, no, we haven't covered all the wings. I forgot about 2 important guys, Nick Batum and Terrence Mann. Batum is a player who is quite injury-prone in Charlotte, which led to his contract being much maligned. But there's a big difference between that 4-year, $96 million albatross of a contract or whatever it was and the 1-year minimum deal that he signed with the Clippers for this season, and I think that he's going to help this team out quite a bit. As recently as 2 seasons ago, we saw him be a knockdown shooter from 3. He shot it right around 40% and was also a plus defender. If he's able to bring that to this Clippers team this year and makes him a absolute plus coming off of the bench as a really solid option on the wing. If he can't stay healthy, however, there's certainly some bust potential here, and we could see him really bottoming out and being an unplayable guy for large stretches. Next guy here is Terrence Mann, who is someone that I like quite a bit. He's one of my favorite young players who doesn't get much respect, and I certainly think that of the young guys on this team, so like Kabengele, Oturu, Coffee, Scrub, he is definitely my favorite because I think that he really has a place in the league as a role player because of his plus defensive ability as well as some capability to get to the rim with his athleticism and burst. He's not a superb athlete. He's certainly not De'Aaron Fox out there, not that high-level burst that allows him to get around anybody, but he can do it at a high enough level, and he's a smart enough player to know when to pick and choose his spots, when to attack, and when to just pass off and make the smart decision. But really where his value is on the defensive end of the floor. He can guard multiple positions, essentially 1 through 3, and also some 4s. Obviously, he's not someone that you want out there guarding Anthony Davis or Giannis Antetokounmpo because he doesn't quite have the size and strength to take on those guys. But he is a quick enough defender that he can guard all of those different positions, and he plays very hard on that end, has a great motor, and is someone who can really, really help this Clippers team out and make their defensive potential all that much more higher. The questions with man come with the jump shot. Last season we saw him shoot it at a 35% mark, which is fine and all, but considering that all of that was off of catch and shoot opportunities for him to really stick, I think that probably needs to be closer to the 37 to 39% range. However, I think that considering everything I've heard about his work ethic being terrific and his motor being great, we can see him improve that jump shot, and this is a guy who's going to be playing in the NBA for like a decade plus. Now that we've covered all the wings for real this time, we can move on to the big man position. I think Serge Ibaka is likely to be the starting center for this team, so we'll start with him. Genuinely a player that I like quite a bit. Not sure I would have given him the mid-level. I think that he's worth slightly less than that, but he's still an impactful player and an improvement over Montrezl Harrell. Why do I think that? Well, I think that he is a better defensive player than Harrell because of his shot blocking capabilities. He's a plus rebounder, and he has enough mobility that he can guard some slower wings on the perimeter. And Montrezl Harrell was essentially dead meat on that end, so definitely an improvement there. And on offense, I also think that Ibaka is a similar level player to Harrell because of his shot, floor spacing and shot making ability from the perimeter, as well as some post game, whereas Harrell needed to be in the primary action. He needed to be a pick and roll big man in order to be effective. Ibaka can be much more of a complementary player, and on a team like the Clippers that are going to be playing Paul George and Kawhi Leonard for high minutes during the playoffs, Ibaka just makes a lot more sense as a positional and rotational and systematic fit for this team. And so, considering he's a better defender and an equal offensive player who's also a better fit, I certainly love this move for the Clippers, and I think they significantly upgraded their second center position because I still view this guy as the first center for this team, and that's Ivica Zubac. I am an absolute Zubac fan. I think that he is going to be a top 12 starting center for a long time in this league. He rebounds at an incredibly high level, one of the best offensive rebounders in the game. He's a solid rim protector. He's certainly not Rudy Gobert or Bam Adebayo protecting the basket, but he is a smart player and does a nice job of contesting shots at the very least. On offense, he's a really good finisher at the rim, terrific in the pick and roll, and also has some ability as a passer out of the short roll. The combination of all those things makes Zubac a really high-level option at the center position, and he's someone that I like quite a bit, and I hope that he's able to get the minutes he deserves in this year's playoffs from Ty Lue, because Doc Rivers certainly was hesitant to give those to him. Next guy here is Patrick Patterson. Patterson is a player who can give you end-of-the-bench minutes during the regular season because he is a pretty good three-point shooter, but he has almost no defensive value at this point, and he is not much of a shot creator whatsoever. So he's basically just a floor spacer, and that's not going to get it done in the playoffs. A good veteran to have, and someone that can give you those regular season minutes, but overall not much of a ceiling raiser whatsoever. Mfiondu Kabengele is someone that I liked quite a bit coming out of Florida State because I thought that he was going to shoot the three, and he showed some rim protecting capabilities. He also was someone that I thought was going to be pretty good in the pick and roll as someone who could take those dump off passes and finish. Apparently the Clippers don't like him too much because they immediately used a high second round pick on another center in Daniel Oturu the following year, but I still believe in Kabengele, and I think that he could be a quality center in the league at some point during his career. Last guy here is Daniel Oturu, last player on the roster to talk about. Oturu is a big man that I was a little bit high on going into the draft. I think I had him between 35 and 40, so I certainly think that taking him at 33 was a solid pick. He provides intrigue as a big man who can shoot it, is going to space the floor and be a stretchy 5 for you. He also is a plus rim protector on the defensive end and can finish at a high level on offense, so you can see the value there. But on the defensive end, he's really bad in pick and roll coverage. Sometimes he gets a little too shot happy on offense and doesn't make good decisions on either end of the floor very consistently. But if he can iron out those kinks in his game, there's certainly a mold here for a player who could be a starting center at some point in his career. Now that we've talked about all the players, I think we're ready to preview what the results for the Clippers could be in this season. I think that this team is going to be really good. I think that with the additions of Luke Kennard and Serge Ibaka, in my opinion, it put them over the top. I never stopped thinking that they were the best team in the Western Conference, and this just made it all that much stronger to me. I like this team more than I like the Lakers for this season. I don't know if when I make my picks for who I think will win the finals and stuff right before the season starts, if I'm going to pick this team to be the Western Conference champ, but I think that they're really, really good, and I think that people are really sleeping on them. Also, I watched a video, or maybe it was a podcast or an article or something. It was about Paul George, and someone was talking about how he's getting overhated and underrated, blah, blah, blah. And then the point they made was, oh, Paul George is still a top 25 player. What? You just underrated this dude in your own video talking about how underrated he is. He's a top 15 player still because of the shooting ability, because of the team defense, because of his shot creation. And anyone who doesn't think he's at least a top 18 to 20 player just really needs to rethink their position on Paul George. Kawhi Leonard is a top 3 player. It's him, LeBron, and Giannis in my mind. They have very high level role players like Patrick Beverley, like Luke Kennard, like Serge Ibaka, like Zubac. I think those guys are really going to help this team out in the playoffs. I like this team quite a bit. I think that they'll probably be more of like a 2 or 3 seed in the Western Conference next year because I don't know that they're going to be too locked in the regular season. We'll probably see quite a bit of load management from them. So in a regular 82-game season, I'd probably pick them to win somewhere between 48 and 52 games, which means that in this shortened 72-game season, my win prediction for the Clippers is somewhere between 45 and 50 games. Let me know what you think in the comments. How many games do you think the Clippers will win this season? How far do you think they'll go in the playoffs? I think that the floor for this team is the Western Conference Finals, and the ceiling is their NBA champions. I know that probably makes them quite a bit higher, makes me quite a bit higher on them than anyone else maybe, but I'm still a believer in this team, and I think that they are going to be very, very good in this upcoming year. I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Like I said before, leave a comment on how good you think this team is going to be this year. That's it for me, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you all again very soon.